There comes a moment in every woman's life when she looks in the mirror and decides enough is enough, enough waiting, enough shrinking, enough giving all your love to someone who never deserved your light in the first place. That moment when you reclaim yourself is the most powerful moment of your life, because it's not heartbreak that defines you, it's how you rise after it. Detachment is one of the most misunderstood expressions of strength in a woman. People often see it as cold, distant, or even cruel, but the truth is, detachment is not about being heartless. It is about having heart, but choosing not to lose it in places where it is not safe to love fully. It's not about shutting down emotionally, it's about opening your eyes emotionally. Detachment is the moment you realize that your peace is no longer up for negotiation, and your energy is no longer available for people who only show up when it's convenient for them. There is nothing cruel about choosing clarity. There is nothing cold about choosing yourself. In fact, detachment is born from deep emotional maturity. It takes strength to care and still walk away. It takes courage to let go of what you once prayed for when you realize it no longer feeds your soul. Detachment is not the absence of emotion. It's the awareness of what emotions are worth investing in. It's knowing you can love someone deeply and still refuse to tolerate being disrespected, ignored, or made to feel small. A detached woman is not one who stopped loving. She is one who started loving herself more. She is no longer available for the confusion, for the breadcrumbs, for the emotional roller coasters that leave her questioning her worth. She has sat with herself in silence long enough to know the difference between love and attachment, between presence and performance, between someone who sees her and someone who only sees her when it's easy. And that clarity changes everything. It makes you realize that not everyone who wants you deserves you, that not every connection is meant to be held on to, that letting go is not a loss, it's a return to your center. When a woman detaches, she becomes magnetic in a way that can't be faked. There is a peace in her silence that speaks louder than any argument. There is a glow in her calmness that says, I know who I am, and I don't need to convince you. Her energy stops chasing, and in that stillness, she becomes a mirror, reflecting back to others what they've lost by taking her for granted. This is not bitterness. This is not ego. This is power, quiet, grounded, undeniable power. The kind of power that doesn't demand attention. It commands it without saying a word. The world teaches women to cling, to fix, to fight for love at any cost. But real empowerment comes when a woman learns that love should never be a battlefield. That real love doesn't make her anxious, it makes her feel safe, and anything that disrupts her inner peace isn't love, it's a lesson. A woman who detaches isn't giving up, she's growing up. She's done explaining herself, done waiting for half efforts, done believing potential over patterns. She's not punishing anyone. She's just finally choosing herself, perhaps for the very first time, and in that choice she gains vision. She sees clearly who is aligned with her truth and who is only there for the version of her that was easy to manipulate. She no longer interprets someone staying as a sign of love and someone leaving as a sign of failure. She understands that sometimes absence is a gift, that not being chosen was redirection, not rejection, that sometimes God removes people from your life to clear space for what you truly deserve. Her clarity doesn't need revenge. It doesn't need drama. It just quietly closes the door and locks it from the inside. Detachment also teaches emotional boundaries in the most graceful way. It is not an act of shutting people out. It's an act of keeping your spirit safe. A woman who detaches knows the cost of emotional availability in the wrong hands. She's learned that being too accessible to the wrong energy can drain her joy, distract her purpose, and dim her light. Her detachment is her way of saying, I know what I bring, and I will not waste it where it's not appreciated. She's not asking to be put on a pedestal. She's simply refusing to be put on hold. This is what makes her unforgettable. Not because she begged for attention, but because she never needed it. Not because she played games, but because she outgrew them. not because she stopped caring, but because she cared enough about her own heart to protect it. Her detachment is not about walking away from love, it's about walking toward the kind of love that doesn't ask her to lose herself. It's a declaration not of rebellion, but of rebirth, a declaration that she has chosen peace over chaos, depth over drama, and alignment over attachment. There is something undeniably captivating about a woman who knows her worth. A woman who walks into a room not to be seen, but because she already sees herself. Self-respect is not arrogance, it's not attitude. It's not some performance of superiority. It's a quiet, unshakable knowing deep in her soul that says, I am enough. And when a woman truly believes that, the world responds differently. People look at her differently. She doesn't chase energy, she commands it without lifting a finger, because there is nothing more irresistible than a woman who refuses to settle for anything that doesn't honor her. Self-respect begins the moment a woman stops begging for love, for attention, for bare minimum effort disguised as affection. It begins when she realizes that no one is going to come save her, and the only way out of the pain is through herself. Through her own healing, her own boundaries, her own self-loyalty, and that shift, that sacred shift, is where everything changes, because when a woman respects herself, she stops entertaining things that once broke her. She no longer asks for clarity from someone who was always confusing on purpose. She no longer pleads for closure from someone who was never brave enough to be honest. Her self-respect gives her the strength to say, if you can't show up fully, don't show up at all. There's power in that kind of presence. There's power in a woman who doesn't need to scream her standards, but lives by them with such consistency that anyone who can't meet them simply fades away. She doesn't need to explain her boundaries. She is the boundary, and the truth is, this kind of woman makes people nervous, not because she's cruel, but because she won't be controlled. She won't bend just to fit into someone else's idea of who she should be. She won't shrink for comfort. She won't trade her dignity for temporary validation. She would rather eat alone than sit at a table where love is conditional. A woman with self-respect carries herself differently. There's a stillness in her, a calm assurance. She doesn't need to overcompensate or impress. She doesn't wear masks to be liked. She's already accepted who she is, flaws and all, and that authenticity makes her radiant. She honors her time, her energy, her presence. She's not afraid to say no, not afraid to walk away, and not afraid to start over, especially if it means choosing herself over and over again. She knows that love should never cost her her peace, that being wanted is not the same as being valued, and that being loved wrong is not better than being alone. Self-respect is magnetic because it draws in people who recognize your value without needing to be reminded. It eliminates the need for games, for emotional acrobatics, for trying to be enough, for someone who never deserved you to begin with. The woman who respects herself doesn't need to beg. She doesn't need to prove. She doesn't need to perform. Her energy speaks long before she does, and it says, I'm not here to be chosen by someone who's undecided. I choose me. People often talk about love as if it's the highest form of connection. But the truth is, without self-respect, love becomes sacrifice. It becomes a one-way street of overgiving and under-receiving. But when self-respect is the foundation, love becomes balance. It becomes mutual. It becomes a space where both people rise, not one person constantly rescuing the other from their own lack of emotional responsibility. A woman who respects herself refuses to live in survival mode, constantly proving her worth to someone who can't even show up for themselves. She knows her presence is a gift, and she won't hand it out like loose change. The most breathtaking thing about a woman with self-respect is that she doesn't need to be loved to feel lovable. She doesn't need to be wanted to feel worthy. She's not waiting to be completed. She is already whole. Her love is a choice, not a need. Her presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. And because of that, when she gives herself to someone, it means something. It's not about being needed. It's about being respected in return. It's about being met in the same depth she offers others, and if she isn't, she won't break down. She'll simply bow out, gracefully, quietly. Unapologetically. That's what makes her unforgettable. That's what makes her powerful, because self-respect isn't loud, it's not boastful, but it leaves an impact that lingers long after she's gone. Confidence is not a look. It's not the outfit. It's not the makeup, the heels, the carefully curated Instagram captions. Confidence is a presence. It's the way a woman walks into a room without needing to explain why she belongs there. It's the way she holds her head high when everything around her tries to pull her down. It's the fire in her eyes that says, "I know who I am," even when the world forgets. Confidence isn't the loudest voice in the room. It's the quietest one with the deepest impact. It doesn't need applause to feel valid. It doesn't seek permission to exist. A confident woman doesn't need to announce her worth. She just is. She doesn't ask, "Am I enough?" because she's already answered that question for herself. She doesn't wait for others to approve of her before she moves forward. She makes choices that align with her truth, even if that means standing alone. And somehow, her silence becomes louder than someone else's shouting. You feel it before she speaks. You see it in the way she walks, how she doesn't flinch, how she doesn't chase attention, because she is the attention. That kind of energy can't be taught. It comes from deep healing, deep knowing, and a decision to never shrink again. Confidence is not the absence of fear. It's choosing to show up even with the fear whispering in your ear. It's standing tall after you've been knocked down, not because you weren't hurt, but because you refused to stay broken. It's trusting your own voice after being silenced for too long. Confidence is forged in moments when no one claps for you, when no one sees the effort, but you keep going anyway. It's born in the silence of your own resilience. In the nights when you doubted yourself but showed up the next morning like you never did. That's what makes it real. When a woman is confident, she doesn't need to convince anyone of her value. She walks in her power without waiting to be validated. She doesn't compete, because she knows there is no competition when you're aligned with your own magic. She claps for others without shrinking her own shine. She uplifts, she empowers, but she never compromises her boundaries to be liked. She doesn't tolerate behavior that disrespects her worth. She doesn't confuse crumbs for love. She speaks with grace, moves with intention, and if she says nothing at all, her silence alone demands respect. That's the kind of confidence that lingers long after she's left the room. There is something deeply magnetic about a woman who is rooted in herself. She's not the loudest, but she's the most unforgettable. People remember how she made them feel, not because she tried too hard, but because she didn't try at all. She just was. She owned her story, the beautiful and the broken, and that authenticity radiated louder than any performance ever could. She doesn't dress to impress. She dresses to express. She doesn't love to get something in return. She loves because it's who she is. And when she's done wrong, she doesn't beg. She doesn't bargain. She lets go with dignity because she trusts that what's meant for her will never require her to lose herself. A confident woman doesn't use her strength to dominate others. She uses it to protect her peace. She doesn't chase people, positions, or praise. She knows that what is aligned will always find her, and what isn't, she's not afraid to walk away from it, not because she's unfeeling, but because she's evolved. Because she no longer lives to be chosen. She lives to choose. Confidence gives her the clarity to say yes only when it's right, and no without guilt, to show up fully or not at all, to be deeply kind but never naive, to be open-hearted but not open to disrespect. When you meet a confident woman, you know she carries an unspoken strength. You can feel it in her laugh, in her stillness, in her refusal to be shaken by things that used to break her. She's not performing confidence. She's embodying it. Her confidence is a quiet rebellion against everything that once tried to make her small. It's a flame that doesn't need oxygen from anyone else to burn. And when she moves, when she speaks, when she simply exists, you realize one thing clearly: confidence doesn't need to raise its voice. It already owns the room. Somewhere along the way, women were taught that they have to win love, that they have to prove they're worthy of being chosen, that they need to chase, fix, convince, or overextend just to keep someone interested. But that was a lie, a deeply ingrained, emotionally exhausting lie. The truth is, you were never meant to beg for what you are. You were never meant to plead for a seat at a table you built with your own hands. You are not the pursuer, you are the prize, and the moment you truly understand that, your entire world changes. You begin to move differently. You stop running toward people who walk away too easily. You stop lowering your standards just to be accepted. You stop proving your worth to people who never even bothered to see you clearly. Being the prize isn't about ego or entitlement. It's about alignment. It's about knowing your value so deeply that you refuse to settle for anything less than mutual energy, mutual respect, mutual effort. It's about being done with lopsided love stories where you're the only one showing up. Being the prize means you know what you bring to the table, and you refuse to offer it to someone who doesn't even know how to sit with you. When a woman sees herself as the prize, she stops begging to be chosen and starts choosing herself. She realizes that her presence is not something to be accessed carelessly, that her love is not a reward for inconsistent effort, that her time is not a playground for someone else's indecision. She no longer stays in situations out of fear of being alone because she has finally learned to enjoy her own company. She doesn't chase love anymore, she attracts it. Through her peace, her wholeness, her clarity, through her energy that says, I am not afraid to be by myself because I am already enough. This is not about arrogance, it's about self-honoring. It's about knowing that a woman who knows her worth won't water herself down for anyone. She won't bend just to be liked. She won't tolerate being half loved, half prioritized, half seen. She's not waiting around for someone to decide if she matters. She knows she does, and if someone can't meet her there, with the same depth, the same loyalty, the same consistency, she won't argue. She won't beg. She'll simply step back and keep moving, because the prize does not chase. The prize does not perform. The prize does not compete for attention that should be freely given. There is a sacred shift that happens in a woman's life when she begins to treat herself like the prize. She stops over-explaining, stops seeking closure from people who never gave her clarity, stops romanticizing potential instead of honoring the reality in front of her. She starts choosing peace over chaos, solitude over shallow connections, and depth over distraction. And that choice, that rise is magnetic. People start to notice her differently, not because she's louder, but because she's rooted. She knows her energy is rare, and she no longer gives it away just to feel needed. She's no longer flattered by attention. She's impressed by consistency, by presence, by effort that matches hers without her having to ask. The woman who knows she's the prize doesn't need to control anyone. She doesn't manipulate, doesn't compete, doesn't hustle for crumbs. She simply exists in her truth, and that truth repels anything less than what she deserves. She knows that the right person won't make her chase. The right person will recognize her light and rise to meet her, not run from her. And until that person arrives, she will continue to pour into herself, build her dreams, and walk in her purpose. Because her life isn't on hold for anyone to catch up. She's not waiting to be saved. She's already saving herself every single day. Being the prize means understanding that your love is a gift, not a currency to bargain with, that your worth is not tied to who chooses you, but in how you choose to show up for yourself. It's not about being better than anyone else. It's about being so deeply aligned with who you are that you no longer compromise that for temporary attention. You are the prize because of your resilience, your grace, your fire, your softness, your story, your strength. You are the prize because you've survived things no one even knows about and still show up with love. You are the prize because you never stopped becoming the woman you were always meant to be. There comes a moment in every woman's life when she realizes that silence can say more than words ever could. That walking away without a speech, without a storm, without a single tear shed in front of the person who broke her, that is the loudest declaration she could ever make. Silence is not weakness, it is not surrender. It is strength in its purest, most graceful form. It's when a woman has said everything she could say, shown up in every way she knew how, and finally chooses her peace over being understood. And in that stillness, she becomes untouchable. People often mistake silence for indifference, but they have no idea how much a woman had to feel to get to the point where she says nothing at all. She screamed in her pillow, cried in the shower, prayed through the chaos, and journaled through her heartbreak. She questioned herself 1,000 times, tried to fix it, tried to fix them, tried to believe in the promise of potential, in the memory of the good moments, and when none of it worked, she didn't explode. She just got quiet, and that quiet was not a void, it was a decision to stop giving her voice to people who never truly heard her in the first place. Silence is not passive, it's powerful. It's a boundary wrapped in grace. When a woman chooses silence, she is no longer trying to prove, to persuade, to perform. She is no longer in the ring fighting for something that should have come naturally. She's done arguing with people who only listen to reply, done explaining her feelings to someone who was never emotionally safe, done justifying why her needs matter. Her silence says, I've realized my value, and I'm no longer investing it where it's dismissed. I've realized my energy is sacred, and I refuse to waste it explaining my worth to those who only see me when it's convenient. The world tells women to speak up, to fight harder, to hold on longer, but there is an unmatched power in a woman who decides to walk away without a dramatic exit. She doesn't burn bridges, but she doesn't wait for someone to finally notice she was the light. She becomes unavailable without announcing it. She withdraws without rage. She disappears without bitterness. And that absence, it echoes, it makes people wonder, it makes them realize how loud her presence actually was, because she didn't leave to make a point, she left to protect her soul, and in doing so, she made the deepest point of all. Silence can be the most eloquent kind of self-respect. It's the refusal to beg for what should be freely given. It's the ability to observe without reacting, to see the games, the patterns, the manipulations, and still not respond. Not because she doesn't care, but because she finally does, about herself. Her silence says, I won't interrupt my healing to explain why I walked away. I won't spend another minute handing over my power to people who never earned it. I don't need to be loud to be heard. I just need to stop showing up where I'm no longer seen. A woman's silence after she's been disrespected is a storm in disguise. It is filled with the weight of everything she wanted to say and chose not to. It is the maturity to let people sit with their own behavior, to allow the space for accountability that no amount of words could ever create. Because sometimes silence is not about being nice or being passive, it's about creating distance where there was once desperation. It's about saying, this chapter is over, without slamming the door, just closing it gently, firmly, forever. People remember the woman who chose silence, not because she was forgettable, but because she was unforgettable in her grace. She didn't need to scream to make her value known. She didn't need to insult to defend herself. She didn't need to curse to express her pain. Her silence was poetry, her exit was art, and the absence of her energy became the loudest consequence of all. Because when a woman goes silent, it's not about punishing someone else, it's about preserving herself. She no longer needs closure from others. She becomes her own closure. She doesn't need the last word. She already had the last truth, and that truth lives in her silence, in the peace she chooses, the drama she walks away from, and the fire she no longer puts out just to keep others warm. She speaks volumes now, not through noise, but through her quiet refusal to accept anything less than what her soul deserves. There is a moment in every woman's journey when she awakens to a truth that changes everything. The more she detaches from what isn't for her, the more she steps into her true power, not the kind of power the world tells her to chase, not loud dominance or performance or the need to prove, but something deeper, something sacred, the kind of power that lives in her stillness, in her intuition, in the quiet knowing that she does not need to cling, beg, or hold on to anything that requires her to abandon herself. Detachment doesn't mean she doesn't care. It means she cares too much to keep betraying her peace for people who can't meet her at the depth she offers. It means she finally understands that her energy is not a currency to be spent on inconsistency, on mixed signals, on almosts and maybes. When a woman detaches, she's not closing her heart, she's protecting it. She's no longer tying her sense of worth to someone else's ability to value her. She knows who she is. She knows what she brings. And if that energy isn't honored, she doesn't fall apart. She rises. There is something wildly magnetic about a woman who is no longer emotionally enslaved by how someone else shows up, or doesn't. She's no longer performing for love, trying to be palatable, shrinking herself to be accepted. She has outgrown the need to prove her softness, her strength, her loyalty, because she knows when she gives love, she gives it fully, but she no longer attaches her identity to whether or not it is returned. She loves from a place of wholeness, not survival, from fullness, not fear, and when love is not reciprocated, she lets it go, not with bitterness, but with deep, unapologetic self-respect. Detachment doesn't make her cold. It makes her wise. It teaches her that peace is more important than presence, that sometimes walking away without drama is the highest act of self-devotion. She no longer exhausts herself trying to hold up connections that crumble the moment she stops carrying all the weight. She no longer sacrifices her joy for someone else's comfort. She no longer explains her standards to those committed to misunderstanding them, because now she sees it clearly. Detachment is not about pushing people away. It's about finally calling her energy back, reclaiming her light, and remembering that her power was never in being needed, but in being whole. The feminine in her doesn't need to chase. It doesn't need to force. It flows, it allows, it receives, but it also protects. The detached woman has learned to stop pouring from an empty cup, to stop begging emotionally unavailable people to love her right, to stop attaching her dreams to someone else's dysfunction. She becomes rooted, not reactive. She becomes soft, but not open to chaos. Her power lives in her ability to say, I release you, without hating you, to say, I choose me, without explanation, to walk away not as a punishment, but as a declaration of her divine value. There's a glow that returns to a woman when she detaches. Her eyes become lighter. Her energy becomes cleaner. She starts creating instead of chasing. She starts listening to her own voice again. She starts returning to her body, her breath, her soul. That anxious need to be chosen, gone. That hunger for validation, faded, because now she realizes she was never too much. She was just too much for someone who wasn't ready, and that's not her burden to carry. Her detachment becomes her clarity becomes her freedom, and her freedom becomes her radiance. She no longer explains her silence, no longer rushes to fill space with words, no longer overextends to keep the peace. She knows her presence is a gift, and not everyone deserves access to it. She's no longer afraid to sit alone at the table because she finally sees what she brings to it. She no longer waits for permission to shine. She just does, and in that quiet detachment, she becomes electric. She becomes unforgettable. She becomes deeply rooted in her feminine power, not because she's untouched, but because she's untethered. The most dangerous woman is not the one who yells, cries, or fights to be heard. It's the one who smiles, lets go, and keeps glowing. The one who chooses silence over chaos, peace over panic, alignment over attachment. That's the woman who's done being at war with herself. That's the woman who is no longer for sale to the highest bidder of attention. That's the woman who has remembered who she is. She no longer attaches her joy to outcomes. She simply lives, and in that space she becomes the very definition of freedom. So detached, not because you don't care, but because you care too much about yourself to settle for less. Let your silence speak. Let your boundaries roar, let your confidence remind the world, I don't chase, I attract, and the moment I chose myself, I became unstoppable, because that is the power of self-respect, that is the power of confidence. And that, my loves, is how you become the kind of woman no one can forget, even when you've walked away.